So today what we're going to do is attempt to connect the dots. So we'll cover and review several things that you've talked about during the entire semester and try to make these connections. So by the end of the session, you really have a good sense of how your teaching goals and your sort of issues or problems that you had when you joined Impact, the sorts of things that you wanted to accomplish are connected to your learning outcomes and what you're going to want to assess, and how will you know that your redesign actually works. So that's sort of the overarching question today. How will we know that the redesign actually worked? Connection, that's what we'll try to do today. So that's why I've asked you to collect or bring with you several things that you had talked about before and show you how they're connected. You're going to still spend quite a bit of time this summer, probably maybe putting some of your lectures online. Then you're going to implement that redesign. Would you want to know if it worked? And that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. So we'll talk about assessment. We'll try not to use the word too much because assessment sometimes has this bad connotation unless you're teaching statistics and then you really like assessment and you value what it does. But that's what we're talking about. We want to answer the question, did it work? So take a few minutes to think about, go back and really reflect on what is it that I want to accomplish here. Okay? Is it more engagement of my students? And we have measures to look at that. Is it more critical thinking? We'll talk about information literacy. So maybe that is something that now you want to look at. Maybe it's intercultural awareness. I'll go back to that. So I'll be quiet for about a few minutes to think about your goals. Is it that you want your students to be able to do, know, and appreciate? Appreciation sometimes is a difficult one to capture because it's sort of the touchy-feely, right? It's the appreciation maybe of arts. So we've had a class that we redesigned in our last cohort, theater appreciation. So that was the focus of the class, right? But there may be in your class things that you would really like the students to understand that are not necessarily knowledge, skills, or ability to get things done, but you want them to have maybe an appreciation of learning. The fellow that I'm supporting, he's in education, so he's looking at preparing teachers to become elementary and high school teachers, and what he wants them to appreciate is sort of this appreciation of lifelong learning, so they can teach that to their own students. So that's something a little bit more, it's not as concrete, but it's still measurable. So what I want you to think about is that it's not because it's a goal that is difficult to measure that you should shy away from it. Okay, so there's ways we can brainstorm. There's a lot of very smart people in this room, so we can figure out a way to document and answer the question again, did it work? Did my redesign increase appreciation of the arts, for example, right? Appreciation of learning. Okay, so there's a little bit more to think about.
And me is not enough.
There may be things that you were not really thinking about when you started the redesign that now you think maybe you should think about a little bit more. And this is why I ask you to review your teaching goal inventory, the results of your teaching goal inventory, because sometimes it's hard to put words into what we really want our students to know, do, learn, appreciate. But the TGI, if you remember, asked you a series of 52 questions and how important these goals were for your class, and then it clustered them for you. So it kind of did this work, this higher order level work for you. And then we think, oh yeah, everybody wants their students to be more critical thinkers. right? We all want the students to come out of, not necessarily just our class, but come out of a higher education, have a college degree, and be good problem solvers and great critical thinker and write well and communicate well, but we don't want to teach it, right? That's great. It's a wonderful idea, but I don't want to be responsible for teaching it, and I don't really want to assess how it's, because critical thinking, how do you assess that? I don't know. I just want them to just do it, right? They should develop and end up with this sort of knowledge. It's going to happen by osmosis. I don't know if you remember, I mean, it's still present, but this sort of conversation about writing across the curriculum. That's the same idea, right? So employers were telling us students can't write, they can't communicate. They're still telling us, by the way, that they can't write, they can't communicate. It's sort of the number one things that employers want. So they want the disciplinary knowledge. They want them to know how to do the job that they will do, but they also want them to be able to communicate. But who's going to teach writing? Is it just the writing department, the English? It can't be, right? You get this class, English 106 in your first semester, and everything magically should work. And if they don't get it at the end of 4 years, it's the English department's fault. Well, that, you know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So there's this sort of commitment that we need to make. Same thing, I think, with critical thinking and problem solving. The students need to see the relevance of what they're doing. You know, if you do nothing else in your redesign, then to help the students understand the relevance of what you're asking them to do, you will increase motivation, which will then increase engagement, which will then increase learning. So if you're able, so the clincher here is that as instructors, we have to create these learning environments that will engage the students. And what that means is that they're not necessarily just active in the classroom, but they see why they should care. So it may be that, well, even if you are a data analyst or a research coordinator, okay, if your major is stats, you will have to write reports. And if you cannot write a good report, you will not be the person who will be promoted. You will not be as successful as somebody else who can write. This is important. So what we're doing and what we did throughout the redesign is to give you some tools, techniques, things that have been supported by research that, you know, that tell us that if you do certain things to your learning environment, it's likely to produce more learning. Well, the mediator in between is the student. So the students in that learning environment is more likely to want to engage. Sometimes it's to show them the passion about your discipline. These are the, I haven't enough for everybody, but these are the core curriculum learning outcome rubrics. So I think last week you should have received the one about leadership and teamwork. So leadership and teamwork is one of these, but they're all, you have them all in here. So critical thinking is in there. Information literacy is in there. Intercultural learning. So perhaps you're thinking now, yes, my students should be more skilled or competent in information literacy. I really want my course to focus on that. And if that's the case, I would point to Clarence and say, Clarence is our information literacy expert, and I'm sure he's got lots of ideas on how to implement that in the course and how you could use a rubric to then look at projects or pieces of evidence. If you're interested in intercultural learning, then we have Chuck Callahan in CIE, whose office works to promote global learning in faculty and in students. But again, it's difficult. If you want to measure critical thinking, the students are going to have to think about something. We're going to probably have to write. It's connected. You have to sort of see the expression of what they have learned or not learned. How do you connect it to them? Make it relevant. Find the hook. May not happen the first time. I struggle like this also. Students are not lazy. Students are not disengaged. They're not demotivated. They're very motivated to do lots of things, just not the kinds of things that we ask them to do in our classroom. And I think that before we point the finger at the student, we have to look at what we do in our classroom to create that environment that may be contributing to some of the disengagement. I think that we need to take a critical look. So that's important in the redesign as well. The tools, the techniques, what you'll implement, what you'll change in your class need to be in the service of those learning objectives. That is what drives the redesign. Sometimes just the alignment, and we'll talk about that next slide, just the alignment of your learning goals to what you will actually do in the class, what you will ask the students to spend their time on, may create more motivation and more engagement and more learning. Okay? This is the learning outcome map. You've been working on that map. I've called it the expanded learning outcome map as well, because this one, what you have to do, and if you have not completed this map, that's when I'm going to give you the 15 minutes. I want you to really focus on completing this map. You may not finish it in 15 minutes if everything is not completely in place. But this is important for several reasons. It's really going to guide your redesign and allow you to answer the question of did it work? Okay? So we pick 5, 6, maybe 7 learning outcomes. I wouldn't pick 30 because if you have to assess whether these learning outcomes were met, you will not be done next semester with 30 outcomes. Okay? So you may have 30 learning outcomes, but let's focus on a small subset. So you have your learning outcomes that are mapped onto the Bloom's taxonomy from lower to higher order level, and also your activities, your proof of evidence. Where will you see that learning? Okay? Because learning occurs within the student. It's a process that happens within the student. If you want to know if you made a change that actually improved the attainment of those learning outcomes, I need some kind of comparison. We'll talk about that more. Need some kind of comparison. But you also need to know where's that evidence. So that's what fills in the table. Where's that evidence? So if I say that, for example, information literacy is one of my learning outcomes, where will I see evidence of information literacy attainment or lack of? Okay? Is it going to be on my final exam? And if it's in my final exam, where in my final exam? Question 13, is it the open-ended question? And if you have an open-ended question, you probably need to use a rubric. Now, will the entire rubric score become my evidence of performance? See how kind of alignment? Were you able to put some pieces together?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You want to share a little bit, Daphne, with your experience?
One of the things is, like, you have something, and at first we looked at it as, oh, that's just recall. Well, like, well, not really, we want them to recall this. We also want them to build on it more. So how do you have an outcome that is, so for example, I will have test quizzes online that just define technical things. But then you want, well, then you want to apply this to something so that it makes, so they apply it, so they have a higher level thinking, right?
Right.
And so it's like that's the part that we're missing. So that's like, okay, now let's look at how can I take that. I don't have that right now. We'll develop it in the next few weeks. But you know, how do I take that and apply it to something? So the example I've used before is a service project. I have a service project now that I like, but it's not working for this. Okay. So a project I did like 2 years ago was a lot better. So how do I take, because that's the hard part, like what community partner can I find? Right. Because then it's meaningful, it's real world, it's applied, and they're freshmen, so it helps them connect. So one of the goals is to help them connect so that they want to continue to learn. It's not as hard as
Each discipline has its own challenges, though.
So it's construction, so it's construction management. So, you know, it's an easy thing to connect to. But the hard part is you don't want it to be too hammer nail. You want it to be the overall.
Right.
So it's an interesting problem, but a good thing, because I think it'll be very powerful.
I'm reminded again of a point that Michael Wesch made in his presentation. The difficulty in teaching is not teaching, it's asking the right questions. And that's what I think that's what I heard in your comment. It's like asking the right question, picking the right activity. How will it connect? Making sure it connects. That's the tough part. Once you have that, that's the creation of the learning environment. It sounds simplistic, but the learning humans are built to do stuff. They're built to want to make meaning, to be active, to learn. You're going to do stuff, things that interest you, things that are relevant. That's the problem right now. So picking the right question, that's what I heard. I think what I'm going to share with you now is to think about how will you answer your question? And how sure will you be that the redesign actually created this improvement in learning outcomes? Okay, how will you know that it worked? And we're going to talk about research design and different options as to how you can answer that question. Okay. I'm going to give you this flow chart. And we're going to walk through that flow chart. And what we're trying to do here is where's that data? Where are those evidence of student learning or lack of learning? So if you start here, you join Impact, and we've talked about learning objectives, so you've done a lot of that. We've talked about pedagogy, now we're talking about assessment. So those are the three sort of pillars of what we're doing in a redesign. So the first question that we're asking you is, am I revising or writing new learning objectives? Most of you will be saying yes. You'll be on that side where you at least revise your objective or writing new one, except Laura. Laura is in a situation, and there's a couple of others like that, where you can't. For whatever reason, maybe you're part of a group and you're all teaching the same curriculum, and the learning outcomes have to stay the same. Then you're on the no side. Well, the benefit here is that you have the easy model. Okay? So if you say yes, if you say no, I am not modifying my learning outcomes, then you are in scenario A. And what is scenario A? So now I'm going to show you this slide, and we're focusing at this point only on the SLO's piece. Don't look at the bottom where it says student perceptions. We're only looking at the learning outcomes. So your learning outcomes are the same, which means that if you taught that class before, you have quite a bit of historical data on how the students did in the past, because those learning outcomes didn't change. You even have the advantage of probably teaching multiple sections with the same learning outcomes, and then you have the opportunity to try your redesign in one section and not in the other. So you can really look at the impact of the redesign. So Laura's thinking about doing an inquiry-based project where they take their research question, collect data, analyze the data, they stay with that project the entire semester, as opposed to go through the material, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, okay? So how is that impacting learning? Okay, and then you have the luxury of having all that historical data. So historical data, pre-redesign right now, SLOs, you have performance data before the redesign. And then you'll be able to look at the performance data after the redesign and look at the difference. Hopefully, they will become better at meeting those learning outcomes. So the challenge here, if you're writing new learning outcomes, is that you need to capture some kind of baseline. Where are the students at right now? Okay, and you could capture that this semester, historically, if you want to, you could say, oh, I have an opportunity, finals is about to occur. I could throw in a question that would measure intercultural learning and get that performance data right now. Or you could think about doing this at the beginning of your redesign. So in the fall, when you start to teach the class, you could have a pre-test. And you could give them an exercise. Have them think about that problem, that question, and measure the extent to which, possibly using the rubric, you see evidence of intercultural learning. Okay, hopefully it's going to improve at the end of the course. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? You say, if I'm going to teach it, it's probably going to improve. So what that tells us is that that's just a weaker design. It's just a weaker way to answer the question, did it work? Did my redesign improve the attainment of those learning outcomes? But it's still a way. And we'll have multiple pieces of data that we'll look at. Scenario A is stronger. If you're looking at in terms of how convinced you are that it worked, it's stronger because you have a lot of historical data. Okay? And then B is somewhere in between. So you have a combination with scenario B, you have a combination of completely new learning outcomes and some revised learning outcomes. But with the revised learning outcome, you can probably, it's not going to fit as well, but let's say that I talk also statistics. If I want my students to understand how to calculate a correlation coefficient, even if I did not have that specifically written out as a learning objective, I was still doing that in that class. So I have questions historically where I asked the students to calculate the correlation coefficient, and I know how well they did, okay, and how many mistakes they made. Now, if I do an inquiry-guided project and they see why they need to calculate correlation so they get better at it, I can look at the two. Right? So sometimes the fit won't be as clear, but the idea here is to go sort of on a fishing expedition, a little research expedition as to where is that evidence. Right? How much cereal did you eat this morning? I don't know. Right? I didn't measure it, and I ate it. Well, how could you find out? Right? Well, let's see. I kind of know what my bowl looked like, and I kind of see how much cereal I had. So I'm going to go home tonight, measure it, put it in the bowl, and say, oh, yeah, it was about a cup. I won't eat it. I'll put it back in the box. But I may be making a mistake. You see where I like to play with analogies. So it may not be a perfect fit, but there is a way to find out that data. So I'll stop here a little bit, see how you're digesting. So what do you think?
I think it makes a lot of sense in theory.
Yep.
I'm really concerned about exactly what data you need and how it needs to be broken down, and it just seems like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
To provide this data historically.
It is a lot of work.
I mean, are you looking for us to extract performance on particular exam questions or just exam scores, or?
Sorry. Is there a class coming in early again?
They have the room at 1:45.
Okay.
We confirmed that.
Okay.
Okay, good. It could be either, it could be both. And what I would like to do is make it relevant for you. So I'm going to reframe what you said, and when you said what data you need, I would say what data do you need?
Right, because it says you will provide your map assessment data to impact, which is,
Oh, that's,
You will. You will.
I will provide, and then I'm assuming that, you know, you have the IRB approval to get into, you know, student records
yeah,
and all
we'll talk
that.
about that. Actually,
But,
yes. The learning outcome map, that's the learning outcome map. So that's the data. When you map this to either a final exam and you tell us where those questions are at, that's the learning outcome map that it says you will provide. So yeah, you were already providing.
Right, so I'm thinking the learning outcome map and the learning outcome data, which would be actual scores, in my mind would be different. So yeah, can you clarify, would you like this, or would you like historically grades from
We
courses?
need this, so
Right.
by the
So-
end of,
Yeah, so
by next week, we'll have this. And as you complete your redesign, we will also look at data, student data, actual pieces of data. Now you mentioned the IRB, very good point. Because impact is an educational project, we have access for educational purposes to all of that data. So we can actually have, we have permission, the student data.
Oh, like the
Grades,
grades, the
basically.
final grades?
The grade book and everything, as long as we don't publish it. So for educational purposes, we can look at your grade book data, match that to historical data, and then post-test data, IDP. So if you did Scantron exams and they were scored by IDP and you want to go back a couple of years and look at that data for the specific question, we can do that. Okay? Option 2. So option 2 is what we're talking about that. Now, data handled by impact researcher. Because I'm a faculty member, I actually have a level of access that is different. And because impact, because of the nature of impact to be an educational project, it's part of the project so that we report on the effectiveness of the project. We can look at that data at the student level for educational purposes. She wanted to, from the get-go, make this a true scholarship of teaching and learning project. She wanted to publish on it. She wanted to present at conferences. So she partnered with us. We partnered with the faculty. She went through the IRB process, completed the CITI training, and received IRB approval. And it's an exempt study because she is the faculty on record. I had to sign off on it because she had similar situations in the same department. But this was approved very easily. So we have templates of that. So each one of you as faculty member responsible for that class can do that and publish on the results. So that's a very appealing option if you are, even if you're not tenure track, just for your future career. In addition, it allows you to see how you can improve that redesign. Often the redesign will not work perfectly the first time around. It's very frequent that it will take a couple of iterations of the redesign to really find the right project or the right question to ask. So that data, whether you pick option 1 or 2, will allow you to then improve your redesign the second time around. Okay? So it is not just a sort of a, oh, impact needs that. It's really for you to be able to improve on your redesign. Actually, some data collection went on this semester. So your students received a couple of emails, one at the beginning of the semester and one at the end. And what we did, what was included in those surveys were things like classroom evaluation questionnaire. So the student perceptions of the learning environment were assessed. Time 1 and time 2 historically. So we already did all that. So we have a sense of how the students perceive the learning climate to be, how student-centered it is, how competent they feel in mastering the material, how confident they are that they will be able to master the material, so this sort of level of engagement, it's tied to engagement. And we expect those to increase. And we have that time 1, time 2 historically because we want to see what's the natural increase in your course, because just through maturation, the students will change. They will become more familiar with the discipline. So we expect some amount of increase. We just hope that there's going to be more increase after you implement the redesign. Okay. What we'll be able to do, however, and this is started with your class, is that your support team is working with you and identifying all of the elements of that redesign that you're putting in. So are you doing problem-based learning? Are you using clickers? Are you flipping the class? Are you recording some of your lectures? And at that level, disaggregated that way, we'll have enough data to look at, for example, if you use clickers, cross several redesign, what's the impact of using clicker? What's the impact of using problem-based learning? That's what we'll use the data for. But right now, we're having some issues in terms of within each class, the response rate is very small. So we can't say much predicted at all.
Can we see?
Yes, absolutely. So the second, so all the data is collected for this semester. It's closed. So I would say that in a couple of weeks, you'll have access to that data. So we'll let you know. We'll contact the support team, and you'll be able to take a look. And that will also help you inform your design. Okay? So if you, for example, know that the students already perceive your learning environment to be very student-centered, well, that's a strength. Okay? So you're already doing some good things. Maybe they still have a lot of doubt or they're not very confident. Then we can think about, okay, what kind of strategies can we use to increase level of competence? So you'll have a sense of what to target. The student learning outcomes section, that's what we relate to the SLOs. So Mickey, right? Mickey's question is related to that. That's difficult, absolutely. It takes a lot of work on the faculty member, absolutely. We can help. We have graduate students that work on this piece of the assessment. Some in CIE, some in the Discovery Learning Research Center that are paid to help you get that data.
Oh, good.
Okay? So you're not doing it on your own.
Good.
Okay?
That's what I was worried about.
We still need your help because some of the things you'll have to extract for us, but we can definitely help. Okay? So we have manpower, people power to do it. What I wanted to mention also is that if you want to know more about this and you say, okay, I really want to get a handle around this to be able to answer the question, did it work? Okay? We will be having a research workshop, an additional research workshop during finals week, and we'll offer two options. So we have Tuesday and Thursday, which are, the dates are, it's the week of April 29th. So the Tuesday would be the 30th, and the Thursday is May 2nd. We'll have research workshop sessions. I will send an invitation. It's in the morning. I think 10 o'clock is when it starts, from 10 to 11:30. So if you want to come and attend that session, we'll send you, this video will be part of the session, this map is part of the session. So some faculty, we're inviting all of the previous cohort because we're getting better at figuring out how to answer the question, did it work? So some previous fellow are coming back and going through that exercise, how to extract my data, where's my data, did it work, how did it work? If not, what we end up having is that we have lots of classes which look different because they've been redesigned, but we have no evidence to be able to demonstrate whether having a class that looks different, sounds different, that took a lot of work to create, improved learning.